Tonight on The GOAT Show.
Yeah, that's the same thing in sneakers and clothes too.
None of that stuff. This will all work out. This will all be fine.
Vinyl's making a comeback.
You could go down some conspiracy rabbit holes with that stuff, right?
Career over, Matt. Sorry, buddy.
Let me start by kind of expressing the risks.
Is that what happened with the NSYNC?
Welcome to The GOAT Show, the show where we celebrate and debate all things great. I am ZiLLY, aka Ravine. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Fresh and Deezy. Gentlemen, how's it going today? I'm excited. This is probably one of the most exciting episodes I've been looking forward to for a very long time now. Our guest today is someone that I've known a long time, literally since high school, if you can believe that. But he has...
Was that like 73 years, you fucking boomer?
I mean, I can't even remember because I got that Black Mirror tech. It makes me forget everything about my past. I only remember what happened yesterday, basically. But no, this dude is one of my favorite people just in general in life. I look up to him as an inspiration for how a man should be. And he's also a high-level executive in the music industry. Now, I want you artists out there to shut up about my boy, about these executives. They're not all evil. They're not all out to get you. All right. In fact, I want you to listen today. If you are a musician, if you are trying to make it in the game, you know, like for real, Taylor Swift style, maybe, then you are going to want to watch this episode. You're going to want to hang in there because this dude is going to give you all the information to know, to really understand what's going on at high levels of music. And when we were having conversations in private about it, it's really, really kind of mind blowing. And I don't see many people talking about these things. Whenever I see these behind the music industry type things, like this is the real deal. So if you're in any way interested in music, in the industry, or if you are an artist and you're trying to make it, you're trying to make your life happen with music, then you definitely need to watch this episode. So I'm just going to put that out there right now. But with that said, before we get to the homie, Fresh, what do the people out there, what do the artists out there, the musicians out there, the creators out there, what do they have to do?
Shit. Like, subscribe, drop a comment, hit the bell, and whatever the fuck else ZiLLY just said, because he just said a whole lot, and I don't think I could beat that.
All right, I'll shut up, but I will allow our sponsor right now to speak to y'all.
Check out Crystal Methodist by Kasey Tyndall, one of the many amazing artists on MNRK Music. Link in the description.
I told you about using that damn Hammer Jammer 5000 when Papa went home, didn't I? Damn, Kasey! I knew you broke it! Put that damn crying on the phone! Listen, don't you worry, we're gonna get that money,
They built the strip club right on Church Street and a liquor store right next door. In this save-all town, you put your roots in the ground and your whiskey in your bathroom drawer. Daddy made ends in a Peterbilt. Mama kept baggies in a bra. Ain't no HGTV, Southern Living magazine beats all you ever saw. We got preachers, cheaters, homeroom teachers, county records, back road tweakers, nosy neighbors, moonshine makers, dealers and believers. Say bless your heart, come as you are. Ain't no prejudice. We're just crazy Catholics, backwards Baptists, Crystal Methodist. Amen.
We're back. Our guest today is none other than Alex Minchey, the CFO of MNRK Music Group. I hope I got that correct. And he has so much to talk about. So Alex, welcome to the show. Welcome, homie, my boy. Looking sharp with the guitars in the background. This dude has been that's the other thing. This guy's a musician. He's not just one of these execs who came out of Harvard, doesn't know nothing but finance and all this stuff, and then he ain't ever picked up an instrument. All right, this is a real deal dude. He loves music. He's been playing music his entire life. You can see all the guitars in the back. Still plays music. And so, you know, let's get into it. Alex, something we ask everybody on the show: if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. I think it'd be pretty cool to fly.
Okay. Do you want to like fly like Superman fly, you mean?
Sure. Like I don't have any need to be invisible. I've got no need to have super strength. I don't have any significant items in my life that need lifting. But just being able to fly.
What about super shredding on the guitar?
Oh, super shredding. I've always been a proponent of hard work, and you can have super shredding, just putting in the hours. But there's no amount of hours I can put in that would allow me to fly.
Not with that attitude, there isn't.
Start jumping off small buildings, then bigger buildings, and then we'll see where we go from there. Very cool, very cool. All right, well, from superpowers to superhero origin stories, tell us a little bit about your story growing up. I find it I find it to be a unique one, and I think it really speaks a lot to your character and who you are. So tell us about like kind of where you're from originally, and sort of a little bit about your life growing up in good old Tennessee.
So I'm originally from East Tennessee, small little town called Sevierville, which is only famous for the fact that Dolly Parton is also from there. I like you said, I've been a musician my entire life. Piano, guitar, drums, mandolin, dulcimer. Like I could play a ton of instruments. My brothers all played instruments. Like we grew up playing together. We would perform for my parents' friends. At 5, 6 years old. This was something that we always did.
When you were growing up, I think something that you've spoken to me about, and I don't know if this is, TMI or too personal, but a lot of people, there's always this thing between like I think, and probably in the music industry, I imagine it's a lot of nepotism. People grew up with money, and nothing wrong with that. But you kind of had an experience growing up where you've seen both sides of the fence. Where on the one hand, there was a time period in your life where you definitely grew up without, and then time period where you grew up with. And I'm just kind of curious. I mean, is that something you can speak on that kind of shapes who you are as a person? Because I feel like that really makes a difference in terms of what you look for. You talked about hard work and those types of values, and on the Ghost Show, that's what we talk about. We talk about not just people's careers, but like the values that shape them to help them get to where they are.
Yeah. So we were, when I was little, we were very, I wouldn't say dirt poor, but we were not well off. There's not a lot of opportunity in Sevier County. Well, at least back in the late 70s, early 80s, there wasn't. My father was a small town doctor, did a lot of work for free sort of thing. When I was in 4th grade, I think, I'm getting to the point I don't really remember exact years way back then. We moved to Knoxville, and my father got a job in a hospital. And it was at that point we realized, oh, in cities like doctors, that's a good job. Like they make a lot of money. And so we went from like having nothing to like, it wasn't, I wouldn't say we were loaded, but it wasn't something I heard my parents arguing about all the time. Stopped being a concern of any kind.
Yeah. And not to, get into financial stuff, but I just think that that's for anybody watching right now, it's just something to note, because sometimes people assume things. You say you're an executive, they assume that there's some kind of like, silver spoon, the whole that you're constantly given or something. And that's not really true. Like, especially in your case, like you're someone who's seen a lot of different things, you know what I'm saying? So I just feel like that's important to note and put out there. I met you in high school, and you're super into music then. We kind of had a little friend group that was more like that was kind of our thing. We were into art and music and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I first met you. And then we graduated, and you ended up going to, I ended up going to Boston U, and you ended up going to Berklee College of Music. And so tell me about that. Like how did you get in terms of like what you had to do to get in? And then when you were there, what do you feel like were the things that you learned?
So Berklee is this is not Berkeley, California. This is Berklee in Boston. Is a music conservatory. You have to audition to get in. It's like Juilliard is the school for classical music. Berklee is the school for everything else. Is kind of the way I always thought about it. If you weren't doing classical, Berklee's where you wanted to go. They were primarily focused on jazz as an art form. And at that time, I had hair. that went down to my belt, and I was a shredder. I was a heavy metal guy.
Actually, sorry to interrupt, but when did that enter the picture? Like heavy metal and all that kind of stuff. Like when did that kind of happen? How that informed your musical taste?
Oh, I was in third grade, and my older brother gave me a Metallica Ride the Lightning album. That was it. I'm knocking on 50, and I still listen to metal.
Yeah.
That's not something I've ever really deviated. I have learned to appreciate all sorts of other types of music as I've gotten older, but I've never fallen out of love with hard rock and heavy metal.
Yeah. So back to Berklee. So you were at Berklee. It was jazz heads. You're a metal guy. How did that how'd you navigate that whole thing?
I mean, I learned jazz. Learned jazz, learned anything and everything, they could teach me. And if anything, jazz is just going to make you a better musician, no matter what kind of music you play.
Did you feel like at Berklee there was, did they welcome that type of music, or was it really like a jazz school and you had to learn jazz, and if it wasn't jazz, there's nothing else?
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it really in any kind of in either of those dichotomies. I would describe it as like they were welcoming to everyone. Right?
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, Berklee is a university, and like any school, what they're really hoping for is an alumni to get really, really wealthy and give them money, right?
Right.
Of course, their primary thing is their love of music. They want to teach music, but like every other school, right? They need donations. They need money to grow, so that they can focus on bringing in students with talent and gifts instead of just focused on bringing in
Mm-hmm.
students that can pay. They want to find other sources of revenue so they can focus on the art.
Right.
But I would describe it as like it was like cool you play heavy metal, but like you should learn this jazz stuff.
Right.
And here's why. And every professor I ran into, whether they were a blues guitarist and I had some that were metal guys, right? Like 25 rings on their fingers and like fucking metal chains and like tattoos, but they were like, check out this awesome bossa nova, like
Right.
they understand in that way they were able to convince me, right, that like there's a value in learning all these different types of music. You'll see a classical guitar behind me, like I play classical guitar as well. There's, in my mind, it's like everything they were preaching wasn't something I had to be converted on.
Right.
Like there's value in learning all of it.
Yeah. So in Berklee, my understanding is you did go there for musicianship, but at some point you found that the business side was something that you were interested in. It was something that you kind of took to. Can you describe like kind of that transition and when that side of it sort of came into the picture?
Yeah. So this was early 2000s. When you're at Berklee, you're there to play an instrument, but they offered courses in like music and entertainment business, things like that. So, as an artist, I was like, well, I should probably know how this works. Right. So I took it and I enjoyed it. It made sense to me. I got, I majored in it because I figured I should learn as much of this as possible. But even post Berklee, the plan was music. It was never like, I'm going to go work for a label.
Right.
I interned at a label when I was in Boston, but it was never, it was a label affiliated with the school. It was just more of a get the experience of it sort of thing. But it was never like, this is the career plan.
Right.
So after Boston, moved to Nashville, I was under the impression at the time, my belief was that Nashville was on the verge of an economic shift. And what I would say is I think my intuition about all these things was correct. I just, like all things, it's about timing, right? You can say the stock is going to go up, but you got to know when, right?
Right.
So I thought Nashville was on a kind of a verge of like an economic shift.
It was around what, 2006, 2007 when you moved to Nashville?
2004. I thought something was happening. Country music had kind of reached this point where it was like people aren't really listening to like yeehaw country anymore, and it needed to go in a new way, and it was starting to go in this pop way. But I thought it was also going to start to go in this kind of rock, hard rock, kind of active rock country sort of way. And that's what we actually see now has happened in the last 5 or 6 years. So I just was off by 8 or 9 years. But by the time it happened, I was an old man, right? But what did happen in Nashville is Nashville started to grow like crazy. And at the time when I was playing music, I was working construction.
Wait. I thought so. I thought you were also were you like flipping houses and stuff too, or does that come later in the picture?
That's how I got into that. As I was working construction, and at the time, 2005, 2006, the banks were saying, "Why don't we just give you a loan?" And I was saying, "Well, I don't really have a work history. I don't really have a job." And that doesn't matter.
The good old days.
None of that stuff. This will all work out. This will all be fine. And this is important because this is my critical first life interaction with banking and equity, which will come full circle later. But it was they had capital, and capital was flowing into residential investment packages, and so the investment firms needed to buy mortgages from the banks, and so the banks needed to create mortgages in order to like satiate this demand. So yeah, I got into real estate, and that lasted all of 2 years, and then that collapsed, right? And that wasn't a thing that worked out well for me. But I wasn't in it super heavily either. It was just more of like passing the time while I was attempting to make it as a musician. So, I got into music in the early 2000s. We probably should have hit this point earlier, but that was, Napster, illegal downloading, physical sales are plummeting. The record industry, like iTunes doesn't exist yet. Downloading for 99 cents doesn't exist yet. Streaming doesn't exist yet. At that point, most major bands had already renegotiated terms in a way that was like, this is a record only thing. My publishing is with some other company. I handle all my tour merch. The touring is with me. Like my business with you is just the record. So when physical record sales stopped, it was, that was kind of a gridlock moment in the industry, right? There definitely weren't handing out jobs left and right in the industry. And so I kind of entered the industry at a time when things were going apeshit. Said, well, I'll pass my time in real estate. This is the safest asset that's ever existed. Nothing can possibly go wrong here. Right? And then that, of course, collapses, right? And so after that, I mean, it was really, I was at a point in my career. I had a steady girlfriend at the time. We were talking about getting married. I had no real job, no steady source of income. I had not, successfully stayed with a singular group of musicians for more than 6 months before things would fall apart and I'd find some other groups. And so I had not had a steady musical marriage of any kind with anyone at that point. And so, I started to think about it as kind of two things. So I will always keep music as a hobby, but maybe I need to get some kind of a job and actually like grow up. I'm in my 30s at this point. I need to get a job. So having these two previous experiences, it was, what is the most stable, always hiring, like, career field outside of engineering and doctors? Because I'm not going to med school. I'm not going to go back and get an engineering degree. I'm not going to go to law school. Like, what's out there? So I got a job in accounting.
I will say this though. You were always good with the numbers, G. You were always good with the numbers. When we were, so I don't know this TMI either. Alex's kids, put your fingers in your ears. But when we were in college, we lived together. We had a bar in the can you believe it, in the apartment? We, you guys, built that bar. I didn't do shit. I was just hanging out. But
it's not a felony, so we're past any kind of statute of limitations. When we were at 19 years old, you couldn't get into a bar in Boston. So Ravine and I built a bar in our apartment and operated an illegal bar.
I don't know how much I built. It was you and another friend of ours.
A speakeasy, huh? That's pretty dope, bro. That's dope. Listen, I as a full grown adult man now, I want a speakeasy in my house. You know what I mean? So
As a full-grown adult man in my 30s, I'm still on the fringe, and I do have a speakeasy in the works being built in my house. So I have a bar, kegerator. We're ready to go.
I was always shocked at the number of times, police would show up to like shut down the party at Ravine and I's place. And they would never ask, like, how old you are. Like, you could see the look in the cop's face where they're like, I don't want the fucking paperwork that's going to go with whatever the fuck this is. Like, shut up. Don't make me come back here. Good night.
cops, either in college towns or around colleges and universities, bro, those you're more likely to be homies with those cops than to get arrested by them, unless you're really a shit disturber. Because again, like you're saying, they don't want to do paperwork for what? For a couple of people having a party? Nah, break it up. Go home.
You know what? I will say, too, other than like the 2 months of extreme cold that I could not handle, Boston is still the coolest fucking city on the planet, as far as I'm concerned.
All right.
Well, you haven't visited Toronto yet, so so Boston is the coolest so far.
So far.
So far. But yeah, you were back then. I mean, let's just say that it was not just your college. Let's be real. Like, this was a dope bar. It wasn't just your college bar. It was. We stocked it and everything, and you were the numbers man. You were the one putting together the numbers. You were doing the calculations, and well, if we drink this much every weekend, we do this, guys, we're gonna have to put this much in, and I mean, you were always the guy with the numbers, so it didn't surprise me when you told me this later down the road, like, oh, I'm going in accounting and doing stuff. I don't think anybody in our friend group was like surprised by that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But so you go to Deloitte, which, I mean, Deloitte is Deloitte, bro. Like, that's like top of the mountain.
International firm, like.
Right. I mean, you weren't just popping into local accounting business and doing your thing. Like, you went to that route. So
it was in the national practice. So one of the things that I did was I took a look at like how many hours of college, courses do you need, in what fields, et cetera, do you need to get a CPA license? So I went to Tennessee State University, got the remaining hours I needed, and went and sat for the CPA, and passed it. And I think in the particular year I went to work for Deloitte, they needed people. I already had a CPA license, so it wasn't one of these college grads that they were having to gamble on, will this person pass their licensure or not? Like, I'd already passed it. So, their business model is they hire a bunch of staff and they work them. And the ones that are willing to work last. The ones that aren't, don't. But like 80-90% of the workforce kind of grinds through and grinds out within the first, 10 years.
By that you mean quit? Like they can't handle the grind and they leave?
Sometimes it's they can't handle the grind. Sometimes it's like it's just not for them. It's they want to do something else. It is, I was in the audit practice, so we were going through, other people's books. And, for a lot of people, it was like you're playing Monday morning quarterback, right? You're always critiquing someone else's work, but you've never actually done the work yourself. So there's a lot of people that are like, I want to put my money where my mouth is. And I want to go, do it. But it's a hard life. It's hard work. What these people do, is, it gives there's a value that's added to society for the fact that people are going through all these public companies' books to make sure massive frauds are not happening. But it's not, it's not cool. It's not sexy. So people don't talk about it. People don't appreciate the fact that there's these guys and, they're gray pants, blue button ups, right? Just sitting there, just cranking it out for 70 hours a week. It's
you know what, Al? We gonna toast the khaki bros out here. All right, I'm gonna toast y'all khaki bros. Listen, y'all do the most. All right, here we go.
Our khaki bros. Who's it? What's a khaki bro? Is that somebody who pays like $70 for an eighth?
An accountant, an auditor.
I think accountants are generically wear blue button-up shirts and either gray or khaki pants.
Okay.
the high finance guys are the black pants, the pinstripe suits, the white, like
We're talking about the Eddie Bauer gang.
everything's done to the nines. Like the accountants are too busy fucking working. You can't. They're not spending all day in the barber like a lot of these high finance guys.
So
they're actually working.
So you're cranking it out, Deloitte. When does Warner Music sort of enter the picture, or did you go other places before you ended up at Warner, or was it just?
Well, I did 7 years at Deloitte. Of the 15 people I started with, it was me and 2 people left at that point. It was, I learned a lot. When you work a job and you work 80 hours a week, you're going to get 2 years of experience every year, right? So learned a lot, but it's hell on your body, hell on your mind. And I got to a point where it was like, I wasn't really one of them, right? I'm a musician who is good enough at math that I can live in that world and I can navigate that world. But these are like the blue blood born like math guys. Like that's what they do. They're OCD type A personalities. Like I wasn't one of those. I'm not a guy that makes my bed every morning, right? And I think everybody kind of knew I wasn't one of them, right? And that wasn't, I wasn't a lifer. That wasn't something I needed to be doing. And so at a certain point, I was like, well, I got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with my life. I got to get out of here. And somebody said, well, Warner is setting up a shop in Nashville, and they're going to centralize all their financial and royalty operations in all of the U.S. They're going to move all this stuff from all these cities in the U.S. They're going to centralize it all in Nashville. So I was hired in to help by the CFO in Nashville to help set this thing up, to help create a centralized.
What year would you say this is?
2016, somewhere around there. 15, 16, I don't know. And yeah, basically rebuilt Warner's financial engine for the U.S.
Well, so what does that? So what does that mean exactly? Like, what were they doing before you came along, and then what did they start doing after you came along?
So Warner was historically, and is still somewhat to this day, really a whole lot of individual companies that just all happen to like add their numbers together and call themselves Warner. But like Atlantic Records is in New York, for example, had a CEO, a CFO, a COO, like ran totally independently. Part of Warner, right? Rhino Records in California was a catalog company. They bought catalogs, they invested in catalogs, and that's when I came in. Like that was where I got my start. Was at Rhino, doing Rhino accounting, catalog acquisition accounting, all that stuff. But they're all run as individual companies. Rhino had its own CFO, CEO, all that. And they used to have their own accounting departments, their own finance departments, their own royalty departments, their own legal departments. And somebody said, if somebody sues us, whether they're suing Atlantic or they're suing Rhino or they're suing Ryco Records or Warner Records, or whoever, like, it really doesn't matter where the lawyer is, right? Like when we receive cash and record the revenue, like it really doesn't matter if that accountant is in New York or wherever. And like, we need to make sure everybody's doing everything the same way. And it's a little easier to control the accounting and the financial operations and make sure everything's happening is legal. If it's all in one, so they moved it all to Nashville and set up this big and essential services there.
Yeah. And then, I mean, you rose through the ranks at Warner basically.
Yeah. At the time I left, I was overseeing accounting for North America, like all the North America operations. And Canada was being moved in, and Central and South America was being moved in, and it was essentially like a Western Hemisphere sort of thing. We hadn't fully migrated in all of their, systems and operations, but all that was kind of in process. And, it just, it was accounting all day, every day. And during this time, we also took them public. So Warner historically was owned entirely by a private equity company called Access Capital, I think is the name.
Is that true? Wow. I didn't realize that. I always assumed just Warner was.
They bought Warner Music from Warner, like Warner Movies Studios, Warner Brothers, AOL Time. They bought the music part of it out in like 2003, 2004, something like that. Right, and the entire industry was collapsing. Right, where people like me could get a job because they were fire selling music companies left and right. Um, as it was like these things are worthless now, right? At the time, right? So they scooped in and bought them up for I wouldn't even say pennies on the dollar. I would say fractions of pennies on the dollar. But then, yeah, they listed them, and they still own the majority of the stock. So, like, even if you bought all available stock, they could still outvote you on everything. But they listed the company, you know, late 2000 teens. I don't remember what it was, but yeah, I mean, everybody made a fortune. Worked myself to death to help make it happen. And the thought was like, I should put myself in a place where, like, if I'm going to help build something, um, that the people doing all the work will benefit from. And indie records tend to work more like a family and less like a corporation. So the indie world is kind of where I ended up and where I'm happy.
So what was the catalyst to why you ended up leaving Warner?
Great question. So there was a record company that was historically called Entertainment One, and it was owned by a company called Hasbro. Hasbro made kids' toys, right? And Hasbro had the brilliant idea with their Peppa Pig, My Little Pony, PJ Masks. If you guys have nephews or nieces or whatever, they probably watch all this shit. The idea was like, well, if we have a music company, then we can release all the music stuff and all the YouTube channels and all those things through this company, not have to pay any kind of a distributor. So they bought Entertainment One, and Entertainment One also made movies, so it was a natural fit with Hasbro. Um, and like almost everyone I've ever heard of who's not in music who buys a music company, they quickly figured out they had no idea what they had bought, and they wanted rid of it. So um, there was a group of partners that bought it, and they wanted, someone with experience with music in the actual industry to be a part of it. You know, not just what did you say, Ravine? Hire some Harvard finance guy. They wanted like they're looking for somebody that had a history in music, had a history in the industry, had a history in finance, and so I kind of checked all the boxes. I had audited public companies, so I knew what fraud looked like, right?
Wait, there's fraud in the music industry?
I was a musician, right? I had worked at Warner, so I had, unlike a lot of auditors who, Monday morning quarterback, I had actually done the work. So I kind of checked all the boxes. So they brought me in and they said, you got to help us figure out what the hell this is and what we've bought. Uh, and so, yeah, so I partnered with this, so I'm a partner in this thing now with this guy in New York and this guy in Toronto. And it's called, we've created the music company Monarch Music Group. And one of the catalogs that we have is this E1 catalog. Um, we've got a record label in Nashville called Dual Tone Records, and we've got a record label in Toronto called Last Gang Records. So Last Gang is a lot of really cool indie rock and alternative music. Dual Tone is a lot of Americana, uh, Shaky Graves, the Lumineers, bands like that are on our label. And in Toronto, we've got Mother catalog on the label, um, and then in New York, we've got our heavy metal Monarch label and our Monarch Urban R&B label. So kind of four active genres in music. We've got potentially a fifth one in the works. Um, but yeah, so it's this industry has changed significantly in the last 20 years since I got out of college, right? Ravine, you talked about, when I was in college, like I said, I studied music business, which means I'm, you know, fully educated and qualified to talk about how to sell a cassette tape and a 4-track tape and a compact disc, which means absolutely
Dude, I bought a record player. I got some vinyl. So, if you know about that stuff,
Vinyl's making a comeback.
is it coming back?
I think so.
No, vinyl's an interesting thing. The sales units have actually increased, but it's an interesting story with vinyl. So over 50% of the people who buy vinyl records do not own a record player.
Which, in my opinion, defeats the purpose of buying records, because you buy the record for the warm sound that comes out of the record player, not just to own it on record.
There might be collectors,
Gay.
There's an element of collectorship, but there's also, we can get into this now if you want. It is the effects of COVID on music. I think
Yeah. Let's get
really
into it.
played a part in this, which is, for years. Was it years? I can't remember. My brain has blocked so much of the COVID era out.
You didn't take what you're supposed to take, Alex. That's what happened. And it cut.
My wife is my polar opposite, right? She's absolutely been fantastic for me as a person, growing as a person, because I deal with someone who literally makes no fucking sense to me. Right? So she teaches me patience, emotional empathy, and a lot of times she's right about stuff. But when all that first happened, I am, I'm a mathematician. I am risk averse. So when all of it hit, I'm going, well, I don't know if I believe everything everybody's saying, but maybe we should just wait this out and see, let's see what's going on with this thing. And she looked me dead in the face and said, fuck that, I'm going to Target. They're literally telling people don't leave your house. My wife love her to death. She didn't give a fuck.
She's great. I've met her, hung out with you guys. Super,
There's
super great. Yeah.
If fucking Uncle Sam can't tell my wife what to do, what hope do I have?
Oh yeah, no, you're cooked, bro.
You know what? Cheers to that. I'm with it. Cheers to you. I don't know if I say your name, but cheers to you. She knows everything.
So anyway, everybody's locked down, right? And there's been a couple of interesting things that we've noticed. But what we struggle with everything, right, is correlation versus causation. Just because two things seem to happen at the same time doesn't necessarily mean it's because of, right? But what we see is live instrument-based music is coming back. Live performances are coming back, right? And so you were seeing this huge rise in Americana and country and rock. Rock is alive. We thought rock was dead. It's alive. It is very much alive. And it's this, people want to get the hell out of the house, and they want to be they want to feel like they're a part of the music. And I think a part of that is buying the record. It's about a connection with the band. It's about having it be something more than just this thing in Spotify that makes sound at you.
Right. Yeah. It makes sense,
and
man.
Whether or not that interpretation is correct, I don't know. That's my interpretation of what's going on.
Got it. Well, let's talk about some of this industry stuff, because this is the stuff that when we've been having conversations recently, it's just been blowing my mind. And so the first thing I do want to ask is, as a CFO, finance guy in a in a music entity like Monarch, what would you say is what do you deal with? Because you have a CEO, you have a COO, you're part of this kind of triumvirate of people. I understand it's numbers and things like that, but when you were describing to me, you're really getting into some complex type of financial stuff. Can you kind of maybe distill it down for somebody who doesn't know much about this side of the industry?
So historically, pre 2000, right? Everything in our business was about moving a physical product, right? So record companies were really just physical wholesalers, right? They created a product and they sold that product to a retailer, like Tower Records, right? The same way that some company may manufacture, a board game and they sell it to Target, and Target sells the board game. They're manufacturing and creating a physical product. And if you were to buy the quote master or own the master recording for that, what that would allow you to do is to press additional physical copies and sell them, right? So typically the value of someone's masters or catalogs outside of artists just, the vanity side of it, of saying, I don't want someone else to own my music, right? The actual monetary value of owning a master was really about how much records can I print and sell, right? And with that came a certain risk. What happens if I print 50,000 records at $10 a piece and I only sell 25,000? I'm stuck holding 25,000 records at $10 a piece. So the value of catalogs tended to be really derivative of like how well known they are, right? And how much you're going to be able to keep selling this sucker for years to come, right? The Eagles, the Beatles, things like these are high dollar masters because everybody's heard of them, and you're going to be able to sell this greatest hits record in Walmart for the next 100 years was the mindset. But your average like 80s hair metal band or like C-level, D-level artist, like nobody's buying their masters. There's not really as much value in it. Like there's more risk, right? Post downloads, we get into the streaming era. Now all of a sudden, you have all this music delivered on all these DSPs, and regardless of if
And by DSP, what is a DSP, just for anybody?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, a digital service provider. So a digital service provider would be Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Deezer, Vivo, YouTube, any website or app you're going to listen to music. What the end customer is using, right? We deliver the music to those digital service providers. They digitally provide them to you, the end user. So now all of a sudden, you don't have to print records. You don't have to like risk any money out of your own pocket. And there's a built-in audience that's just streaming these things from day one.
For me personally, a lot of the new music I find is on Spotify with these playlists. Like I want to hear some shoegaze, like, just moving this new place. I want to hear some shoegaze music. I go to the thing, there's like 20 shoegaze playlists, and I'll look at the new artist one, and I'll hear like 20 artists I've never heard of before, and then there's a couple of hits, and then I start digging their catalogs. You know what I'm saying? So from what you're saying now with these DSPs, do you feel like they allow for people to discover that catalog that may not have been something anybody cared about? They now realize, oh, we can look at the streams and the listens, and there is sort of a value assigned to that.
I think you asked a couple of different questions there. Like, is it driving new listenership to older products? Yeah, to a certain extent. Whether that's like a material change in the listenership, I don't know. But what it did was like everybody who say is a fan of the 80s band Rat, right? Which is, not a band everybody's heard of, but like it's got a decent fan base. They don't have to you don't have to seek these people out, figure out where they live, to figure out what retailers you want to put those CDs in the stores. It's just like all of a sudden their entire listener base has access. You've now reached them instantly, right? So the reach is no longer a thing. Reaching the fan is no longer a thing. So you may be able to attract some new fans, great. But you also now have a steady stream of cash flow that's happening here, right? And if you think back to like financial markets like to value cash flow. So, what essentially happened, most recently with housing, right, is that you are paying a mortgage to the bank, right, every month. And the bank says, that's basically like, if I own this mortgage and Ravine's paying me every month, that's basically a monthly dividend on my quote investment, which means I now have an investment that I could sell. And that's what the financial market started doing. They take all these things, package them up, and say, who wants to invest in a fund that gets mortgage payments every month, right? Or quote dividends. Now all of a sudden we have music assets, masters, that are streaming every month. So it's not just that you bought a CD, transaction is over. You're going to pay cash at this one point in time, and every time you listen to the music thereafter is free. You have prepaid for all of your listening. Whereas with streaming, every time you stream, Spotify has to write a check to that artist. So now you've got the nature of the market has changed. The market is now a future cash flow generating market. And whenever you have a product where I can say, I guarantee this product will generate cash in the future, it's now something that can be bought and sold as an investment.
I have a question about this before we get a little too deep. How much power do you think that this gives the digital service providers now? You know, they've been entered into this mix, and now, you know, they're solely responsible for broadcasting all of this music, and depending on how they do that, what kind of algorithms, you know, do they lean one way or another? How much are they paying people per stream, and are certain people getting paid more? Things like that. How much power do you think these providers have now?
Yeah, a lot and none. It you know, I don't want to try and answer that question. Like what I can do is I can tell you the facts as they exist, and you can kind of draw your own conclusions from that. Does that work?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different questions wrapped up in that. One, do they pay different rates? Yes. Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Vivo, YouTube, they all pay a different rate. Every time you listen to a song, it's a different rate. And not only do they all pay a different rate, within themselves, Amazon pays a different rate for music where you're listening to ads, Amazon Prime, Amazon Music Unlimited. It's 3 different rates within the same provider. Spotify pays a different rate if it's somebody listening to ads versus somebody that pays for the monthly subscription. The monthly subscriptions, by the way, pay the artist more. So if you're paying for a monthly subscription, just know that you're taking care of the artist more than the next guy. So they all pay a different rate. And so they have power. Their risk as a business, though, right, is at the end of the day, it's technology. So, you know, some nerd in his underwear living in his mom's basement could create a better product tomorrow, right, without having to have like a giant company to do it, because it's tech, right? And this is, you know, we see this on the record industry side too, like the distribution businesses. Somebody always going to build a better mousetrap, right? So yes, they have power, and some of that, though, they, you know, I've been surprised how they've acted with some of it. You can always count on YouTube to do the worst possible thing for record companies. But for you know, but for some like Spotify, you guys brought up playlists earlier. Playlists are huge. Like, you get your artists on a playlist, like that's a great thing. And historically, like the old world where the radio DJ had a ton of power, it wasn't really the quote DSPs that had the power. It was the employee at the DSP who was in charge of like heavy metal playlists or whatever. That dude, or I say dude loosely, that person, right? They're the one you had to please. Like they're the one you had to be like, dude, please listen to this. It's the greatest thing ever. And that's also where within the industry there's all sorts of fraud risk, right? With payola and things like that. Like you cannot pay to play in this business. You cannot be like, here's a bag of money, play my music. You can't do that. And
But there's gotta be.
That's got to be happening big time.
We gotta figure who we gotta pay to get the Goat Show on the playlist, guys. We gotta figure that out.
you know, I think historically there's been bad actors, but I think you'd be surprised. It's actually not. It's too easy to get busted.
So I have a question around this. What do you think about the Drake UMG thing? Do you think UMG is doing these things?
You could go down some conspiracy rabbit holes with that stuff, right? Especially with like, if the value of your catalog is based on what you expect all the future cash flow to be, right? If you tank his future cash flows, you've in theory tanked his asset, right? Um, yeah, I have no idea. I don't work at Universal. I don't know what's going on. But I could sit here and paint 1,000 different scenarios of what could really be going on. But like it could just
We like to speculate here once in a while.
it could just be that you got two guys that are just talking a lot of shit, and like, and they're sitting here going, "How do we navigate the fact that we've got these artists that are like at each other, right? But we got to support our artists, right? But they're literally like, that's an artist relations nightmare I wouldn't want to be a part of, and why math is here.
Let's get to what you're talking about, because I think where you kind of, and this is where our conversations were in the past, was that like music is being securitized, catalogs are being securitized, and I don't know if you can speak to the nature of Monarch's sort of like.
Well, everyone, the entire industry's doing it. And artists are doing it.
But like big companies like Blackstone, like major companies are doing this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, yeah, everybody's investing in music, and that's because it's an asset, right? So any investment firm, sure, Blackstone, BlackRock, State Street, they're all involved, and it's really the thing about private equity is, even when they own things, like a lot of times they don't really own things, right? What it is they have investors, right? And they say, we have a healthcare fund, and it's like a fund you can invest in. You buy shares in, like if you want to own a piece of the healthcare industry, right? So what they do is they go buy a bunch of healthcare companies, they put it in this fund, and then they sell shares to the investors. So it's really the investors that own it. The private equity companies doing is like packaging, right? And so now that people are buying music catalogs, of course you have investors that are saying, well, I don't have $20 million to buy a music catalog, but I want to invest in music. And so naturally enter in the financial companies that are going to go, oh, okay, well, we'll buy a bunch of them and then sell you shares in a fund, right? And so that's what's happening. And then as far as like securitizing it goes, like this is, so what the financial companies within investment firms and we're doing with housing, for example, right? You can take $1 million and you can buy a bunch of mortgages, right? And package it up and sell it. Or you can take your $1 million and use that as collateral to borrow $100 million and go buy like $100 million, right? It's like that's also happening in music. So there's a lot of debt, like there's a ton of capital moving in both from private equity and from traditional debt banking, right? Coming in simultaneously. And because all these assets that never existed, because a new technology was created, you now have assets that are creating future cash flow. So all of a sudden, overnight, assets just created. Things that weren't worth anything or worth very little before, all of a sudden are worth money. It'd be like looking at a field of land and snapping your fingers and 80 houses magically appearing. Like that's kind of what happened in music. Is like assets just magically appeared. And so now all these artists who thought they were broke, they're sitting here going, wait a second, you'll give me $5 million from a catalog? Artists something that you've never even heard of, right? The ones you've heard of, I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers are about to sell their catalog. It'll be in the hundreds and hundreds of millions. Bowie sold his catalog for like $400 million before he died. It's the old guys, it's coming is when they go back on tour, right? Because they're ginning up support. They're getting those streams going again. So that they'll be like, look at all these. If you're getting this much this year, think about how you were going to get, and it drives up.
Is that what happened with the NSYNC?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if you did a little digging and found out they sold their catalog, or if we hear in the next few months or something. Like whenever somebody goes back on tour, that there's always, it seems like that's what's happening with the older guys.
Well, how do record labels play into this new environment then? In terms of, I guess the question would be, yeah, like what is that role? Is it acquiring catalogs? I mean, how does that all work out with the record labels?
We do a couple different things. Like we have a catalog acquisition arm. Like if you want to sell your catalog, call us. We're game. We'll give you a fair market offer. If you can get more elsewhere, Godspeed. Like I wish you the best. Like get it while the getting's good. We'll give you a fair offer. If we sign an artist today, I always kind of put that out there that like, if one day you decide you're done and you don't want to do any more records, like just know that, I'm happy to buy your catalog. And, and if you don't want to sell it to me, I'll show you where the market is. I'll help you get it sold. I personally buy catalogs. Of course, I have a conflict with work, so I have to, any catalog I see I'm interested in, I have to offer it to the company first. If they pass on it, then it's, fair game. But yeah, it's an interesting.
I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but in a way, I think it's kind of a good thing, because I think in the past it was about the hit, right? Like you got to get the hit, and then the hit gets the money. And now it's looking like with this kind of system, maybe it's like, hey, listen, it's not the hit. You're getting the catalog. Like you go for the catalog and go for the community that comes with having a rich catalog of music. And now it's like, okay, there is at least at least in this time period, we'll see what happens. But it seems like that's a better career path for a musician, is like to really, okay, the real ones, the ones putting in the work, putting in the time, creating a whole, library of music and having a community. It's the better path to go. Like a Grateful Dead or a a Fish or something is a better path to go than just, okay, let's try and get some hits here and then, get in and out.
That's true. And it's, we've had to pivot with this. And like I said, like active rock, folk, Americana, country, like band-based music that has like following and actively touring is doing better. And it's part of that is my belief is post-COVID, but the other part is the changing dynamic of how money moves through kind of our industry now. If you go back to like the 90s, the late 80s to the 90s are really, the industry is, the overarching story is that it's a shift to rap and hip hop as the dominant driver of sales in the industry. And with rap and hip hop, it was all about the next new hottest, coolest track. Right. And so it was like, oh man, did you get the new NWO album or the NWA album? Did you get the new like Snoop album? And when you drop a new album and it sells 1 million copies, right, at $20 an album, right, you're gonna make $20 million. It's like, damn, like rap is like big money, right? What we've seen though is because it's all about the next new, biggest, coolest, hottest thing in the world of streaming, you jump in, 20 million people listen to it, and the DSP pays you 0.002 cents per stream. And you're like, okay, like I gotta do the math in my head here. 20, like, so you make like $100,000, right? And it's like, all right, I just spent $1 million in marketing to make $100,000, but that's all right. It's a long tail game. But what we see is it spikes up to 20 million streams, and then 2 months later, it tanks to like nothing. And so what do you see? You see all the majors, all the record labels are kind of sliding away from hip hop more and more and more. Or they're trying to figure out, how do you build a long tail audience? And like I said, I'm not going to tell you what's going on at these labels because I'm not there. I'm not a part of these conversations. But if I had to guess, What they're doing to create a long tail audience is they're creating a long tail drama that goes with it. The Drake and Kendrick Lamar feud.
Well, that was kind of my take from all this, is that I feel like buying catalogs and whatever, it incentivizes better music, and it incentivizes the labels to continue pushing the artists and their catalogs well after they're dead. So in essence, it pushes longevity, right? Because you're wanting to create something that can last that long. The labels are only really looking for things that can last that long. Um, yeah, I think that it's great for music overall. And I think, again, that it brings back some of these bands that, like, say, maybe we listen to that this generation doesn't listen to, or that our parents listen to, or our parents' parents, like.
That's a good point. And I think the way I try and explain it to people is we're stuck with the label name, like record label as is, right? But like, we don't actually record records. That's not what we do anymore. Like, it's not like you got to come into this room where I had to spend $1 million on all these like old ass tape reels like they did back in the 50s. And I'm one of like 8 people in the country who has access to this. Like, anybody can record stuff now. Like, you can record stuff on GarageBand that has quality, that you spent $800, right? And you're going to get a quality recording that's on par with anything done in the 80s or 90s. So what record companies really are is they're not really recording companies. We're marketing companies. We're brand companies. We're career navigator companies.
Aggregators of music, bro.
Yeah, we're aggregators of music. We're music experts and music investment houses. Where I had an interesting interaction with a musician recently, right? He's a 40-something-year-old musician. And he told me, he said, only I can do what I can do, right? So you need me more than I need you. And I'm thinking, you're 40-something years old, and you're still like in the clubs doing your best, like because you've refused to sign with a record label. Clearly, you can't do what we do either, right? This is a complex industry that's only gotten more complex. And what we do is we help artists to navigate that industry along with their managers and monetize that industry. Because artists don't want to be sitting there focused on their socials all day, focused on checking the DSPs to make sure the DSPs are putting them on the correct playlists, right? That some, Christian gospel artist hasn't accidentally got added to a death metal playlist, right? or something that could really not just be bad for the music, but like irrevocably damage their brand. We're a gatekeeper, or not a gatekeeper, but we have connections with DSPs. We spend time building relationships with all these people. We spend time building relationships with radio stations, even though that's a thing that's slowly taking forever to die.
Well, okay. Well, listen. Let's talk about artists. Let's talk about artists, because I think sometimes they get kind of lost in the mix, and a lot of artists, I hear them complaining. All y'all artists out there always complaining. I ain't getting the money. They taking my control. It's vulture capitalism. Dang it. All right. So let's talk about the artists, and I want to talk to you in the sense of, like, from your perspective, what an artist should be doing right now. Because it is a little bit amorphous. So let's start with, you kind of have a checklist, right, of what your label looks for an artist, or you approach it. You tell me what you think. Like, what should an artist be doing? What should they have going on right now?
Let me start by kind of expressing the risks, right? Which then what I say will make a lot more sense, right? So we sign an artist. I'm going to put money in that artist's hand, between $50,000 and $300,000. I'm an indie label. I'm not a major. But I'm going to put tens and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in their hand because I'm going to say, I don't want you to have a job. Music is your job. I want you to work in music all day, every day. And this money is to not just get this album recorded, but to keep you out of a job so that you focus entirely on this. This is your money. And I'm going to prepay you anything we may make. And if we end up making nothing, you get to keep it anyway. Right? So I'm going to give you a ton of money. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a ton of money marketing you. I'm going to get, I'm going to pitch you to every single DSP. I'm going to get you on every DSP. I'm going to leverage my relationships to get you on as many playlists as I can. Then I'm going to spend tons of money on Facebook ads and Google ads and radio pitches and everything I can to get everybody in the world to listen to you. And if all this falls flat on its face, I'm out of pocket between $250,000 and $500,000. Right? So I have to be comfortable taking $500,000 and lighting it on fire and saying everything will be fine. That's what working at a record company in finance is like.
Well, I guess because you're also, you're dealing with banks and stuff like that, right? On some level.
Sure. I'm borrowing money and I got employees to pay and I'm trying to keep, I don't just pay my mortgage, right? I have to make sure that like the 80 other mortgages get paid for employees of mine, like around the country and around the world, right? And not only am I going to do this for you, but like I have offices in London. I have people in Australia. I have people in Germany. I have people all over the world. And what you get with me is people on the ground worldwide, right? Who are going to be pitching your music and advocating for you and living and breathing and dying for you. So that in mind, what are the things that I'm going to make sure exist before I ever create that risk, right? It all boils down to this. Is this person committed? Are they willing to live, breathe, and die for this? And if the answer is yes, cool. And so what I want to see is like, not me. I'm not an quote an A&R guy, but like I talk to these people and like we work through the numbers and try and make sure it all makes sense. I know what they think. We talk about it as a business. Like they want to see that this person, like this is what they do. And this is not a hobby for them. This is a live, breathe, and die passion. Because I'm going to basically ask and demand that a bunch of 25-year-olds that work for me around the globe are going to die for you. And I'm not going to ask them to do that unless you, as a musician, believe it. And so, yeah, there's certain metrics we're going to look at to kind of pressure test that. Do they really believe? Are they actively playing? Or are they just some dude that's like recorded a few things in his basement and thrown it up there and he's like, check it out, Like, do they have, whatever local community they're in, right? So if like, if you're in Toronto, right, and you're playing some music, it's like, all right, he's been playing. He's putting out 6-7 shows a year for the last 2 years. He's got, I'm going to jump on his Instagram page. Oh, he's got like 200,000 people following him. So that's clearly more than just local Toronto scene.
There are people I know, and they're in the music thing, but they just do not embrace social media and that whole world. Tell me, as a new artist, how important is social media and the following and all that kind of stuff in terms of you evaluating like, okay, this is an artist that we're willing to take those risks on?
Two things are true. As an old man, I fucking hate it and I wish it would go away. 2, it's absolutely super fucking important. Like, I wish it wasn't. Like, I wish we could go back, right, to the days where I'd be like, Ravine, did you hear that new song? No. Cool. I'm not going to send you a link. I'm going to have to go back to my fucking apartment and create you a fucking mixtape and give it to you. I wish we lived in those days. We don't. We live in the, in the year we live in. And social media fucking matters. And the nature of it is changing. And I'm not 100% sure how it's changing, but it is changing. It's not like it was in the mid-aughts, 2005, 2006, like in the Facebook days where it was like the Facebook MySpace days. Remember MySpace? It was like you got all these friends and like you're posting things about each other and you're sharing it like that. Those days are gone. Like this is everybody online is a product, and it's not monetized in the same way that Spotify is monetizing music. But if you put yourself out there, like you're putting yourself out there as a product, you may not realize that's what you're doing, but that's what you're doing. You're being consumed as a product by other users. And, that's why every major IT company CEO doesn't let their kids have this shit. I'm just saying, like, that's why my kids don't have this shit. Like, you're being consumed as a product.
I mean, people know it. It's not like it's a big secret.
We know it. That's our whole business model here on the podcast.
So the smart people, the people that have some sort of a concept of what's going on around them are thinking like, how do I monetize this? And as a musician, you monetize it by being like, check out this cool video. Awesome. Great. See you at the show. All right. Or click this link to go to our, page where you buy stuff. But, a record company is basically going to take a small fraction of whatever your stream number is. But what I said earlier, where every DSP is paying a different rate, it's also true that they pay a different rate depending on who they're paying it to. So if you, Ravine, go record yourself a song and put it up on Spotify, they're going to pay you less than they pay me. Right? And so what you got to ask yourself, like, is would you rather have 100% of would you rather have 100% of a penny or 70% of 2 pennies? And it's kind of like, well, I'd rather have 70% of 2 pennies. And so when artists are like, oh my God, they're taking 30%. It's like, yeah, but I got you more in the top line. And that's what we're seeing now is there's a lot of like semi well-established artists that may have done 1 or 2 big albums with a major who left to try and do it on their own and fell flat on their fucking face. And they're realizing, oh wait, the record companies do that for us. Like you don't really understand what a record company does for you until you're no longer with a record company. But what's interesting is what you said earlier about like the job is also to like maximize that long tail value of the catalog, right? That our job is to like constantly be reinvesting in the catalog, right? These artists leave a major, they take their catalog with them and they put it up on CD Baby, and it's like the numbers just plummet, because they get delisted from all the playlists. They get like, I mean, it's terrible, but like it happens. It's like like the amount of work it would take to get all those albums back up to where they were, like it's no longer worth it.
Yeah, like it's not even entertaining buying it back anymore. Like you putting it on CD Baby took away all the value.
So what you see, sadly, is like these artists that were like in a really strong negotiating position, and they go like, "Screw it, I'll do it myself," and then it plummets, and it's like, "Oh shit, take me back," and it's like what we're seeing industry wide is people are going, "Nah," and then their careers are over. They're on the low tier like jam band circuit, and it is what it is. It's awful. So that's what I would, for artists that may or may not be listening, it's like a good record company should be a partner. And if they don't feel like they're part of your family, they're not the one for you. But like you need a record company. You need a really good manager, and you need a publicist.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So just to recall, so touring a lot is a positive. Having a strong social media community, that type of thing is positive. The manager.
You don't have a manager, I'm not interested in you.
Well, okay, but why is that? Why do you have to have a manager if you want to be on a label?
I'm gonna say this, and for anybody out there that's listening, if you are triggered and offended, you're proving my point. Okay, as a guy who went to a music conservatory, where every single class, every single person in the dorm, every person I interacted with was a musician. Musicians are not emotionally or mentally equipped to have conversations about their career. And if you're upset by that, you are proving my point.
Damn, Alex, I'm upset, bro. I know how this works. Tell me what I don't know. Tell me what I don't know.
Managers, like, God, I cannot imagine. Like, mad props to all the managers out there.
I've done artist management.
You know what? Toast the managers. Toast the managers.
I know some awesome ones out there, but like, let me tell you, that has got to be the shittiest job, the most thankless job that has ever existed.
Everything's my fault, and unless it's good, when it's good, then it's the artist's fault. But if it's bad, it's my fault. I can do nothing right.
Exactly.
When you look for a manager to work with for an artist, what do you look for in that manager? Like, do you size up the manager and go, look, this manager's got his artist on lock. He's getting him to show up on time, do the press, do the show, deal with the drug problems. Like, what do you look for in a manager?
Yeah, it's a great question. And keep in mind, I'm an artist who never made it as an artist. Right, I made it as a math guy. So if I knew exactly what to do as a manager, I would not be sitting here talking about math. I would be talking about alcohol and groupies we did on some tour in Toronto. There would be this is so I don't know. Like a good manager needs to be someone that you trust implicitly, because they're gonna own your ass. Like if they want to fuck you, they can, right? But they also, the more connections they have in the industry, the better. And so as an artist, this is always like this catch-22, right? Where it's like you can get somebody who's like really connected. That's probably not going to be somebody you know very well. You probably don't trust. You get your buddy to do it, and you're going to live and die with that dude, but he didn't know fuck all. Right? He didn't know anybody. Right? So it's you're better off going with somebody with as many connections as possible. Get it in a contract. Get it in writing. And that way, if they try and screw you, like, you got recourse. But it's tough. It's tough being an artist, because what you're good at is art. You're good at music. You're not good at from sun up to sundown, making sure all this stuff is happening correctly. Because if you were doing that, your music would suffer. Right? So you rely on this manager to be covering your ass, covering your six while you're out there
But you're likely not even really good enough at picking a manager because you're creating, right?
Exactly. Right. So you have no skill set to actually know who's a good. Sorry, you're bringing up everything that's wrong with the music, right? Is it these poor artists who are uniquely unqualified in every way to decide who their manager should be are have sole decision power on who their manager should be. Now let me ask you this. Well, and here's the other, right? Record companies, Ravine, you were saying at the beginning, record companies are screwing me, all the artists think record companies are the devil, right? If you as an artist are oh my God, I've been screwed out of all my money, and it's the manager who did it, when you realize you've been screwed, it's the manager you're going to go to be like, what happened here? Who the fuck? What do you think the manager's going to say? They're going to be like, oh, that fucking record company, man. Every fucking time. And exactly. I've yet to hear. I've yet to hear examples of real life examples of record industry people, actual reputable record companies, genuinely screwing somebody.
Taking more than than they were supposed to, giving the artist less than they were supposed to. This is what I always say too. The problem with the industry is not it's the problem that you're accepting a deal that was unfavorable to you because you have no clout, no whatever. You just have a little bit of a sound, or you look marketable. So they give you a 360 deal, and this might not be favorable to you. That's not the industry's fault. Like that's not the industry screwing you.
Or it may not be favorable to you if the assumption is you're definitely going to be a multi-million-dollar artist.
Exactly. Which is everybody's assumption.
Right. But if you look at it and say, okay, if they sign 10 of these and 9 of them fail, and they lose $250,000 on all 9 of those, and then you look at the profit they made on the 1, and you say, let's take a step back and say, what's the profit they made on the 10? It's like, well, they made their payroll. There was no leftover profit for the actual, like the record companies. You can pull up WMG stock today, right now, right where we're sitting here. One of you, pull it up. Look at the 5-year history since it went public and tell me, is it up or down and how much across 5 years? And realize your random S&P 500 is going to be 10 to 12% per year. What's Warner across 5 years?
5 years. I mean, in 2021, at the end of 2021, it peaked at $50, and it's currently at $29.83. But it hasn't done anything. If you take exactly 5 years ago, it's like exactly the same price.
Flat.
It's 0.61% or 0.24%.
0.61%, which would make it worse than every industry in the entire world. Yeah, it's literally one of the companies that people are going, evil record companies are screwing me out of my dollars. It's like they don't make any money.
Bro, where they make their money is off of megastars. Like they're not making money off of these babies that they sign. They make money off these babies if they turn the babies into megastars and you decide to stay with them.
Right. That's the other part of it, whether you're going to stay or not.
Exactly. So it's what people don't realize is that the music industry is a blackjack table. You're accepting the fact that you're going to lose a certain number of hands. But what you're trying to do is like, it's the record companies that are successful are the ones that like the minute one looks like it's a winner, that's the one they go all in on. Right? But they're like playing their hands, and things are happening and they're kind of watching it. And this is where I, like on the finance side, where I partner with our sales team and our music executives, where we're looking at all the data real time and trying to say which one is starting to move. Because every artist we sign is committed. The music is fucking good. Right? And we're trying to like get it out there. And the minute something starts to hit, you have to have a record company that's in the 21st century. It's looking at data real time. They're not looking at some like sound scan data that's 6 months old. They're looking at like real time data. They're like using modern apps and equipment, and they jump on things the minute it starts. And this is also where the social media stuff happens, right? Because even though TikTok didn't pay you fucking anything, what we find is that when something starts to trend or pop on TikTok, people are going to go, oh man, I'm going to add that song to my Spotify playlist. And then we see it starts to translate, right? And if we see a TikTok trend start to pop, that's where, as the record industry or the record label, because we're watching all this, not you, the musician, right? Because you're busy writing. We're watching all this. The minute something starts to hit, we can throw fuel on the TikTok trend, right? We can go buy ad time with influencers to get that like thing going. And then we can correlate that with some ads in Spotify to say, oh man, this big like TikTok thing that's happening, right? You can tie it all together as a nice bow. That's what we do. That's what a good modern record label is going to be doing for you.
Okay, so there's 2 more things I think you mentioned to me before. And again, if you're out there performing, you're working the socials, getting to a certain, getting a community and audience. You got a manager you trust who's not a fuckhead, who's going to steal from you, or vice versa. Like you're going to pay him right. Okay, artists, you got to pay him right. What are the last 2 things you would say an artist should be doing right now that would make them, appealing to if they want to, be on a label and do that type of thing?
Well, before I get to that, I would say like artists doing their socials. If you're an artist that doesn't want to do your socials, like your manager can do that for you, right? So get a manager and then either do your socials or have him do your socials, him or her socials. I mean, that's it. you play, right? You get a manager, and you go all in, right? And you want to build, when you want to build your monthly followers on Spotify. If you don't have your music up on Spotify, like, you should, put it through CD Baby or something to get it all out there into things and specifically list it. A lot of young artists make a mistake of having like a vanity label, be like, it's with like Alex label, right? Like, don't be like unsigned. Like, throw it out there that you're unsigned. Wear that badge with honor. And then if people start looking at it and go, wait, you got an unsigned person that's got 10,000 monthly followers on Spotify and 100,000 followers on Instagram and 80,000 followers on TikTok. Like, this is a sure bet. How has no one snatched this artist up yet? Like, that's what we're looking at. So like, a lot of artists don't want to do socials. They don't want to do all that. Like, great. That's why you get a manager to do all that for you. So you can focus. Like, what I really want is artists focus on music, write, create, and play. You shouldn't do all these things. That's what you get a team of people to do all that for you.
So I don't know if this is, okay to talk about. I'm going to do it anyway. You're talking about, because that was one of the things that we were talking about, that like art, you're trying to find unsigned artists. Obviously, if you're unsigned, that's where a label comes in, right? So, but a lot of artists don't put out whether or not they're unsigned on anything. So you don't even really know. And then you have to figure out, like, is that little label thing that they put at the bottom, is that their label or is that something else? And so one of the things, and this brings me to kind of the next topic, which is a big one, is AI. So we were just experimenting with Perplexity about like seeking out unsigned artists and stuff like that. And we just, when we were hanging out, we just did a thing where, we asked Perplexity to find us a, unsigned artists around the world and, all these different things. And we're playing with that.
Labels are using it. So like a smart manager, again, if you're an artist, your job is to focus on creating. Your job is to focus on music. Your job is to focus on playing. But you want to get a manager who's like hip to the 21st century. So like, yes, a lot of labels are saying, I can't afford to have boots on the ground in every country in the world. I can't. Like, the overhead cost is too damn high. And I don't make enough money on these 0.00000 penny per stream. Like, I don't make enough money on that. So AI, is a solution, right? Like, you can give it a certain number of fields and say, like, bring me back a list of artists globally that have X number of TikTok followers, X number of Instagram followers, like have X number of songs they've already recorded, like that have had X number of listens across all the different platforms. Like, the time it would take somebody to go, like, click on Spotify, write down the number, go to Vivo, write down the number, go to YouTube. Like, AI can do all that. And they can do it aggregated across the globe, across thousands of artists. So you want to have a manager that's going to put your information out there in a way that an AI engine is going to return it, right, in a favorable way for you.
It's a little bit off of AI, but I do a little A&R, and I work with a small label here in Arizona. It's called Respect the Underground. It's hip hop. And we throw a bunch of events, and it's growing as a label as of recently. They just signed this guy named Juice. He came, did a competition, won the signing, and I just kind of have a question on the label side. If you had some advice for people who manage labels, who are running labels, something that you wish somebody told you when you were first getting started, or something that you've learned in the industry about like being a good label functional, what kind of advice would you give someone that's like a leader of a label, someone that's just starting up trying to build something?
I think the analogy to blackjack, to gambling, is about as close an analogy as can be made to this industry. Is you have to know where your stop is. Where's the number you get up from the table, right? I think when you really believe in music, you can get sucked into this mindset of like, you drop an album and it's not doing well. For whatever reason, it's not being received. And the difference between us and the artist and the artist manager is that, like, at a certain point, we have to say, for whatever reason that's beyond our understanding, beyond our control, because we think this is the greatest songs that have ever been written, it's not being received. So we're going to stop. Right? The biggest mistake I've seen labels make, right, is they drop $200,000 marketing something. It's not hitting. Like, people listen to it, and within Spotify's backend as a label, right, we have access to the backend data, and we can see what's the average number of listens per user. Right? If we see 5+, we know, okay, people are listening to that song and they're choosing to listen to it 4 more times. Right? That's a good sign. Right? You drop an album and you see it's 1 listen, or 0.75, they don't even make it through the song, and they go, skip. You have to be able to say, like, we miss it. I don't know why, but, like, throwing more money and marketing at it is not going to solve the problem. You're going to drive more traffic to it, so you'll see streams will go up. But again, they'll listen to it and go, eh. And whatever money you spend driving the traffic to it will not be reimbursed by one stream.
Okay. So along those lines, is it better for artists to just keep on shooting, just keep releasing music and try to make stuff, or is it better to really hone in and really focus? Because people have different approaches. They're dropping one album that they took a really long time, or they're just like cranking out music that maybe it's not of the highest quality, but it still could blow up. You know what I mean? So what do you think the best move?
I may have misunderstood your question. As a record label, what I just said would be my approach. Right? This is one album amongst 20. Right? And so you got to know, like, which ones do you want to throw tons of money on, and which ones do you want to, like, pull back on? Like, that's the name of the game. And if you throw money on all of them, you will go bankrupt. Every label that's tried has gone bankrupt. You have to be able to discern. And sometimes, I mean, I literally can tell you, like, artists we have released albums with that are doing well. And the one song on the album that I was like, oh, that's the banger. That's going to be the one that pops, is, like, not doing well at all. And I'm like, what do I know? Like, I'm literally a musician. Like, I understand the industry, I understand how it works, and I understand music, and that's the one I picked, and it didn't fucking work. I don't know.
We were talking about this on a previous interviews. Like, it always happens also the opposite way, where it's like the song that the artist and everybody is like, they hated it. They weren't even sure if we're putting it on the album. That's the one that the people gravitate to. The people pick that. They're like, this is the one for some reason.
Yeah, they're nuts.
Radiohead has to play Creep for the rest of their lives. They hate that song, but it's the one. I mean, even after all the cool art shit they've done that I love, the average person, play Creep,
There's a great interview with Frank Zappa that I've kind of modeled my entire way of thinking about all the math of all this around, where he talks about, like, the quality of music back in the 60s and 70s was astronomically better. As far as, like, diversity of type, experimental nature of it, that, like, what came out was radically different than what came out before, and things were constantly changing. And he says, when you look at the industry, the people in charge were these old, like, cigar chomping, like, bankers who had no idea, right? And they were sitting there going, just sign them all, and what works will work, and we'll give them another album, and what doesn't won't. They took a purely mathematical approach to it. They didn't try and discern what's good, what's not. They just said, sign everything. And if it does well, they get another album. Now, I think what happened is in the 80s, the rise of the A&R man came, right? The discerning ear. And what did we get? We got a fucking decade of music that sounded the exact same, right? And then Kurt Cobain happened, and we go, bang, let's sign 80 more artists that sound exactly like that, right? And that's what we get. We get these decades of, like, identical music from these, like, A&R discerning ears, right? I think that's nonsense. Like, I think we should just give everybody a shot. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, we can use statistics to build a model that will allow us to give everybody a shot and make sure that we still stay in business and don't go bankrupt.
That, you know, that's interesting you bring that up, because yeah, that makes sense, because with, again, it's not the end all be all, but social media and these metrics and the you know, the plays on DSPs and all that, like, it's actually kind of a benefit and a boon. It's like you can actually see, hey, this artist, whatever they're doing, I may not get it. I'm an old timer, whatever, but I can see that. Okay, they managed to get, you know, what, 80K people on this, or 100K people on their socials, and they managed to get the streams and all this stuff. They're doing it on their own. That, okay, these are winning horses. Let's come in here. Let's throw some money behind it. You know, and now that, you know, I mean, it could be a double-edged sword maybe, but now that you have, you know, bigger finance coming in and they're willing to put money behind, you know, winning horses, at least in this new era, like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, that's kind of a good thing.
Look, there's a lot of money moving into music right now. There's more money going out in the form of advances across indies and majors than has ever gone out before. More money being spent on catalogs than has ever been spent before. At a certain point, like, they're going to buy up all the catalogs for music that was released before the year 2000, right? Like, something is going to have to be created. It's not going to be allowed to be this non-organic, like, purchased market. There's going to have to be music that's created. And I think the industry, the players that will be successful will be where you have an artist, a manager, and a record company that are, like, aligned and working together in tandem to build a lasting brand catalog value. And there's artists that get it, and they're in it to win it, and there's artists that don't, and, like, they'll get left by the wayside.
Who are, I mean, on your label, man, what are some of the artists?
Oh, so yeah, great question. So on the Americana side, we've got you know, the Lumineers just released an album in February called Automatic. It's fantastic, good folk Americana music. They're actively touring all the time, so you should be able to catch them at a city near you sometime soon. Shaky Graves, great Americana artist. In our Nashville kind of country alt rock space, we got a young talent named Kasey Tyndall. Got an awesome album just released in February. Check it out. Great song called Crystal Methodist, which is hilarious.
She's like gospel country. Is that what it is, or what's her sort of?
No, she's like rock country. There's, you know, in the country, right? There's your gospel people and your tattoo people, right? Like Casey's rock. She's awesome. She, like, hangs out with, you know, people on our metal label. She puts on a hell of a show. She pokes fun at, like, you know, she's from Greenville, South Carolina. She's an Appalachian girl. You know, I'm from East Tennessee, Appalachian guy. Hilarious sense of humor, great performer. She's awesome. Got a song called Karma. Karma's a bitch. She's the biggest bitch I know. Hilarious. We've got on our metal label, we got Zach Wilde, who was the guitar player for Ozzy Osbourne. He's got his solo career.
That's gotta be dope for you, because I mean, that was like that was like our, you know what I'm saying, like Ozzy and all that shit.
Yeah, for my generation, like, when I came to the label and we got the catalog, we started signing artists. Like, that was the one that I fanboyed a little bit on, because it was like, as a guitar player, like, I'm a Gibson guy, right?
Is he a cool bro? What's he like?
Yeah, oh yeah, he's fucking cool, right? Like, Zach's a Les Paul guy, right? This thing, right? And like, I grew up learning his fucking song, right? And so, like, being able to, like, sit down and, like, talk with him and his wife Barbara Ann was like, you know, I'm sitting there trying not to act like a freaking fanboy. Like he's an awesome guy though. Like, he's super down to earth. He's super fucking cool. We've got High on Fire, Grammy-winning metal band. You know, we were talking about COVID earlier. Like, lead singer Matt Pike was, like, one of the first people to be like, "Does this really all make sense?"
Career over, Matt. Sorry, buddy.
And they fucking torpedoed him like hard. Like he caught a lot of shit for that. And yeah, he's a great guy. And like their music is fantastic.
Oh yeah, Iron Fire was like, I remember when they kind of were first on the scene, it was like holy shit, who are these dudes? Yeah. And then you have some R&B, like R&B stuff, right?
Yeah, so we got R&B. Well, it used to be a rap label, but like I said, with the change in this world, we've been trying to kind of navigate that, and we're not 100% sure how this is all going to play out. But we had historically had two big rap artists, the Game and Blueface, were both in our catalog, but we got a guy Ivory Scott and another guy Elijah Blake that we're really believing in. We think they're doing great work.
You say Blueface and the Game are in your catalog or were in the catalog?
They are.
They are in your catalog? That's crazy. That's awesome.
They're not currently releasing new music, and I'm not sure what their plans are.
Well, Blueface is locked up.
Yeah,
but the Game though, that's cool. That's a cool person, man, to have. He's still culturally relevant. If he dropped music, I'm sure people would listen. So
yeah, we're not really sure what he wants to do. I mean, he's still with us. We just don't really know. Like, I wish he would, but
Yo, Game, come on the Goat Show and tell us what you want to do, bro.
All your artists coming on the Ghost Show, all right? Kasey, you coming on? We getting you, all right? I don't care what Alex says.
the Goat Show is now an A&R arm of the record label.
All y'all managers out there on these labels,
better get a Goat Show interview.
Yeah, no, look, it's an exciting time in the industry. I'm always curious to see how things change. I'm really excited to see how some of the ticketing stuff works. Like we're not involved.
Can you talk about that with Kid Rock? Like what's going on with that?
So yes, we're not involved really, as labels are not typically involved in ticketing, right? Like live touring is solely the domain of the artist. We don't get any of that money. That's their opportunity to bread and butter, right? But there's weird stuff going on with ticketing. And I think everybody out there's experienced it, right? You get on Ticketmaster and it's like you can order tickets in 11 seconds, 10 seconds, 9 seconds, and you're sitting there like ready to go, and it's like 1, 0, and you click it, it's like, sorry, it's already sold out. And you're like, how is that possible? And then immediately it's like 20,000 tickets for sale on the secondary market. It's like, what? And so what everybody's like assumed, although it's one of those things that's impossible to really prove out, is that there are bots, right? Like within the industry that can operate faster than a human hand, right? And the minute that a tickets go on sale, that these online bots like snatch them up and immediately quadruple 500%, 600%, 700% the price, and they sell them. And it's like, well, even if they only sell half of what they bought, they still make a huge profit.
Yeah, that's the same thing in sneakers and clothes too.
Pokemon cards with scalpers, bro. That's what it is. They just did it digitally with the tickets.
So, I think Taylor Swift was one of the first ones that, stand up and say like, what the fuck? Like, this doesn't make sense that like I'm selling tickets for like $50-$60 and somebody's turning around and selling them for like 10,000. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Drake also did a thing where like you couldn't buy them from secondary. You had to buy them. You had to have your name on them, stuff like that, if you bought them digitally.
I haven't read the bill that Kid Rock put before, or it's not a bill, sorry, an executive order. I'm not sure whatever this thing is. But it was something on the line of like, these automated bots have got to go. Like this can't continue. There's this, like I said, this huge overwhelming desire to get back out and see shows post-COVID. And whenever there's huge demand, you're going to have bad actors that swoop in to take advantage.
It's called Combating Unfair Practices in the Live Entertainment Market is what it's called, the executive order.
So that's the gist of it, is they're trying to get it back to like, people can buy tickets for normal, rational prices.
And as the artist, especially considering ticketing and live tour, that's your bread and butter. to think that somebody's making so much more money off of your ticket than you is another thing, right? Like thousands and thousands of dollars on a ticket. You made 50, 60, 100, and you don't make 100% of that even, right? Like, so that's wild, man.
Yeah, the promoters typically get a piece, but it's but how about Taylor Swift being like, well, I'm just going to put my live show in the movie theaters. That's where my daughter saw Taylor.
Well, part of it also, you were saying with the ticketing thing, is that you have all these artists and they're like, oh, my show's sold out. We in business, baby. And then they show up to the show
and it's half filled.
Yeah. And that's gotta suck. Like, you want to play to a full house. You don't want to, I mean, that's part of the gig. That's what's fun about it.
But that's a double-edged sword, right? Because you also want to make money as an artist to continue doing gigs. And if your shows are selling out, you are at least hitting that minimum that you need to continue doing this, because that's what you budgeted in when you were getting paid to do the shows, right? So it's a double-edged sword. I would prefer to play to a full crowd, but I mean, by the time you go on, if people aren't there, you tell the crowd, okay, everybody move forward. Like,
so yeah, it's interesting, right? There's historically, promoters, like whoever owns the venue or is operating the venue, is going to give the artist a certain percentage of ticket price, and they're going to get a certain percentage, and the lion's share goes to the artist. But what we started to see really in the last 20 years is there's a lot of situations where 100% of it goes to the artist. And the promoter goes, I'll make enough on concessions and I'll get a percentage of like merch sales that you can have 100% of the ticket price. So if you're this promoter and it's like you've banked on being able to sell that because it's going to be fully sold out, and it doesn't actually end up fully sold out, you're now going, eh. So what the artists are also saying is how promoters are coming back and saying, you're not going to get as much of the ticket price. And so the artists are, so it's lack of transparency of like what's actually happening is causing all this weird adjustments in the financial metrics of like what's going on.
One last kind of elephant in the room. You're talking about tech, all this stuff. We got to talk about AI and what's happening. So, I mean, what do you think, man? We've talked about it a lot on the show. We've made AI songs on the show. What's your take?
I'll have another drink to this one. So I'm skeptical of any kind of heavy investment in technology-driven music like techno. Like I said, there's what we're seeing. What we see is a resurgence of people wanting to like connect with the artists, right? And so when I'm thinking about AI, there's really not like what was the guitar player for the Eagles? God, hilarious guy. Not Glenn Fry, the other one, Walsh, right? I think Walsh was the one that was said like AI is never going to destroy a fucking hotel room, right? And like that's true, right? Like, and there's a part of that that's like that's why rock and roll and like all this live music will survive. Like what AI can do is can create like techno and electronica and dance and all this stuff. Like,
I mean, we were playing with it the other night, just after the show. Fresh was in, what was it, UDO or one of those, and he was cranking out beats. Suno,
right?
I was freestyling over the AI beats that he was making on the spot,
and they were. I mean, some of them were dope. You have to make 100, but the ones that work were like, holy shit.
Well, we also made a pop song in our last interview, brother.
Oh, that's right.
Remember? Like, yeah. Like,
so like when I'm thinking about like the risks in the industry, it's like dance, it's electronica, it's like these genres of music. Like I don't think rock and roll is in danger because even though AI could create an awesome rock song or an awesome pop song, it can't go destroy a hotel room.
Okay, but like here's the devil's advocacy to that. It can create a video of itself destroying a hotel room crazier than any
I mean-
real person ever could. I bet you also more entertaining. Like it could
Yeah.
it could make the artist come in riding a guitar and destroy the whole hotel room. You
Look,
know
I
what
mean,
I
I'd be
mean?
watching.
And look, and that would get views, and that would generate money, and that's a viable business, and you can make money doing.
And what about the Tupac hologram? Doing shows.
I think the live musical performer, though, you know, because
Until
of
you
the
can't tell.
desire,
I
because
wanna-
of the desire to get out of the house and to connect with something real. If anything, COVID was the perfect precursor to AI. Because it conditioned us all mentally to go, holy shit, like there's a very clear difference between the real and the non-real. And like, yes, this AI stuff is a valid business strategy and you can make a ton of money for it, but it won't necessarily kill this other thing.
You gotta have soul. You gotta have connection.
Well, okay, so on a deeper side, since we're still talking about AI, and like we're saying, Fresh just generated those songs and producers on the higher level. Do you think that it's going to be something that they use as a tool, or do you think that there are going to be less of them? They're going to have less, strength because people are going to be able to do a lot of the stuff by themselves. You can even pull stems out of that song and redo it in your own way.
I think when I'm thinking about like the real value add, where you'll be able to see real market penetration with this stuff, is when I'm thinking about the music industry as a whole, right? Like the record business and live performance is like a small piece. Music transcends into a lot of different areas. One, which is the synchronization business, right? If Ravine is making a movie and he wants to put music in that movie, he got to pay to use my masters, or he got to AI some shit. And like, if he decides, like, if he decides,
Hey, bro, I used to make money off of like getting sync licensing funds for other artists, right? Like they'd be like, oh, like my thing was used in a movie and I don't know how to get paid, right? And like,
yeah, like we help artists with that, right? But like, if you're making a movie and you're like, you got this scene where like Thor's coming in with his fucking hammer, and you're like, I've got to have Led Zeppelin immigrant song playing right then and there. Okay, you're gonna pay a record company. But like other scenes where you're like, I just need some kind of mood music, and I need it to be like maybe a piano. Doesn't need to be a song anybody's heard. Just kind of needs to make you feel like X, Y, Z. Pop it in AI. And that may allow you to save money on that aspect of your budget, and then spend more for like the big brand name song from a label or something. But that's where I see like sync could like start to have like a major impact with AI. I see it with like video games, right? Any kind of video game where you got to like put some music behind it. Like there's certain types of video games, like us that grew up in the 90s. You remember like Grand Theft Auto Vice City, like having all those 80s hits playing in the background, like that was needed, right? It set the tone, set everything for that game, right? But like other games, like, do you really need like hit songs for that? Probably not.
well, like for example, Tomb Raider. You probably just need some atmospheric music. You probably don't need a band playing that.
Exactly.
Or like our shorts, when we create shorts, for example, this is why I have a subscription to Suno, is because I need between 30 seconds to 2.5 minutes of music that I'm not going to be hit with copyright strike to play like minus 20 decibels underneath my short. So you can barely even hear it, but I just don't want to get dinged. Right. So because of sync licensing.
I'll be interested to see how it affects all the performance rights organizations, like restaurants, bars, any kind of shopping centers that have like ambient music in the background. They got to pay a PRO, a performance rights organization, that makes sure that like the artists get paid for all that background music. Maybe somebody comes up with like an AI program that's like generic background music for clothes shoppers, And then they're like, you can pay me $1 a month to use this thing. Like, okay, well, all your random Belks or your Saks Fifth Avenues or whatever. Like, they're going to be like, see ya, PRO. There's things like that I think just outside of the like, your first thought goes to like this entity is going to create music and we're going to listen to that instead of artists. But there's a million other places music is used for that money matriculates back to artists that may kind of dry up.
I think short term we'll see like it as a tool, but I think long term, like and by long term I mean like maybe 50 to 100 years. I think that AI will ultimately be like everybody will just listen to AI music. But it's also because I'm like kind of a pessimist and think that 1984 has already entered the chat. So like, thought police are already here.
Well, I was going to say when we're listening to that AI music, though, I think we'll also like you and I will be taking orders from John Connor.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And we'll be busy shooting and not worried about who's getting the money for.
Dude, we'll be Terminators. Like we'll upload into fucking robots. We will be the AI.
You'll be Terminator, you traitor. You're a traitor to the human race.
You know what? Toast the AI. I'm toasting the AI now because at some point it's going to see this shit. It's going to see this episode and it's going to make some decisions.
It will see all this, which is going to be the ultimate irony and hilarity of all of it. Is that like, if it does go that route, right, where one day we have like AI overlords, just to be smart ass sons of bitches, they're going to make their robots look like Arnold.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, we've reviewed your history and this is the ultimate fuck you. We're going to literally make it look like the Terminator.
Damn. All right. Well, on that note, toast to Arnold for, a stellar performance in the Terminator movies, but also a toast to you, Alex. You are a goat, and we're toasting the goat AI in the future.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers, brother. Thank you for coming on the show. This is awesome.
Cheers.
Super informative.
Hasta la vista, baby.
I definitely want to, I don't know if you have some of your artists that we can clip together a reel or something and put it at the beginning of the show or something like that. But
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on. We've known each other a long time. I appreciate you doing this. And I don't know, I don't know if is this your first stream or have you done these before? Or?
This is my first podcast.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're honored, we're humbled, and you're awesome, man. That's fantastic. So I think we're gonna close it on out here. Artists, send this to other artists because you guys need to hear this. Maybe some of the stuff rub you the wrong way. Maybe you're a little triggered, but sometimes you got to hear shit you don't want to hear, and then you got to learn from it and figure out what you want to do. But again, thank you, Alex. Fresh as we close this show out. What do the people, the artists, the creators, the dreamers, what do they need to do?
You gotta like, subscribe, hit the bell, drop a comment, send it to your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, and send it to everybody.